Hello and welcome to our Comp 380 final project. Today we will be focusing on surveillance and social inequity, and specifically how different populations are disproportionately affected by surveillance in the world. My name is Alina Thomas.
I'm Lydia Owens.
I'm Judah Noha.
And I'm Edmund Howell.
Um, Amongst the broader population of adolescents, we are specifically focusing on high school students as they critically engage with technology more than any other section of adolescence. And we are talking about how these adolescents might be exposed to vulnerabilities and how they can protect themselves and their communities against them. So the first thing that we're going to go over is what is surveillance and who is it specifically watching. And as we mentioned, there are vulnerable groups, and we have identified four specific populations within that high school age range. First, we have low income families, and we just kind of talked about how because they are using public Wi-Fi, they are more vulnerable. We also talk about students in police schools, Black and Latinx youth, and LGBTQ teens. And you can click each of these to see more information on this.
All right, the next section is about school surveillance, specifically about technology in these schools and who's protected and who's punished. So while tools like Chromebooks and learning apps are meant to help with education, the way that they're used isn't always fair or transparent. In fact, research shows that some students, especially those in low-income areas and members of marginalized communities, are being watched more closely than others. That constant surveillance can have serious consequences. Here's a short blurb about that with an attached quiz to test your knowledge.
The next section is about the school system and digital discipline. And essentially, this section aims to talk about how surveillance in school can contribute to over-disciplining and how it can criminalize and negatively affect and disproportionately affect minorities in school. And here we have a timeline starting all the way from minor infractions and talking about the long-term consequences that a student can face. So starting off with minor infractions, we follow the path of a Black student named Malik, who essentially went to school and came out and got a minor infraction. And moving on to the process, the teacher ended up reporting and flagging the student disproportionately compared to maybe his white counterparts. Then we get to the escalation of policy, which essentially enacts zero tolerance policies, which historically can target minor marginalized groups. And then from this timeline, we get to police involvement in which Black and brown students are more likely to have police and student resource officers involved for more minor incidences. And from there, going off of their involvement, this can lead to arrest or expulsion for very minor infractions within school, which can put a label on a student going forward. And with that, there can be a lot of long-term consequences, both in school, both in the digital labeling, and especially because of this labeling now, these students, Black and brown students, are more heavily surveilled in school and in their life going forward.
And jumping off from what Jude said, we know that these students in the classrooms are being surveyed. We understand that this is a problem, and so we want to give these students resources of how they can better interact with these technologies. And so we just have a quiz down below. These students can take the quiz, and they will get a score which determines how vulnerable they are to outside attacks. There are questions about biometrics, different attacks that can occur, and then different ways to set up your systems to better set you up as a person who is less likely to be attacked. And so we leave them critically thinking about how they can better prepare themselves and with actionable resources.
And on to the next section. Here we're talking about the digital traps that low-income families face with the technology that they use every day. Because of their economic situations, they're disproportionately affected by said technologies that can be made to maybe exploit them, even though it's masked as a way to help them. And here we can see a couple, here in these text boxes, we see a couple scenarios of apps and technologies that were made, quote unquote, to help these people. But in this section, we're letting you, the user, decide whether you think that these scenarios are actually exploiting or if they're actually good for good opportunities for these low income families. And from that, we added a share mechanism so that this can be also be discussed because this is something that isn't discussed enough in a society. So I urge you to think about it when you categorize it and discuss with your friends to learn more.
So in the next section, going on the topic of being outside of school, there's many other places that students can be surveyed, and we want them to be self-aware of this. And so we developed a few tips and a matching game that makes them think about t different types of surveillance and where the surveillance might show up. And so, for example, we also give hints so that it's a timed game. It's really fun, and they can share it with their friends while addressing most of the places outside of school. We go over things like geo-listening, AI scanning for weapons, which is specifically found outside of school, and a few other categories. We want students to be prepared in all aspects of life to understand when they're being surveilled and understand how they can protect themselves against surveillance.
The next section is why privacy matters for youth development. So this blurb shows how digital surveillance in schools goes far beyond simple safety measures. It reveals deep psychological, social, and developmental effects that constant monitoring can have on students, especially those from already marginalized communities. So by breaking down the risks of tools like Gaggle and other school-issued devices like Chromebooks, we can raise important questions about trust, equity, and what it really means to create a supportive learning environment. Each one of the topics covered in this above blurb allows the student to answer questions in a Jeopardy-style game. This software monitors student emails and documents for mental health risks. That would be Gaggle. All right, perfect.
And so lastly, our last section makes students know their rights. We want them to know what information they're allowed to know, such as different school surveillance policies, understanding the algorithms that are being used for them and against them, and what they can do if they find out that there is a breach of privacy or something else that they don't agree with, so that their voices can be heard and they can be part of their own surveillance conversation. And so this is an interactive checklist. We tell them to start with reaching out to a trusted teacher or counselor to understand the school aspect of things, but also understand where they might get flagged for law enforcement and the risk that that places in their life, as well as we direct them to a few nonprofit groups that work on subjects like these in case they're interested in getting more involved. And we also included a general surveillance tool that helps them fight against surveillance in many different ways. We included things for messaging, in case they hadn't heard of Signal, browsing, using encrypted browsers with Tor, and then finally, just another important note about reminding people to turn off their location services if they don't want to be tracked. And lastly, we put together a short summary quiz. There's a lot of educational content in our website, and we want to make sure that they're coming away with the biggest takeaways to protect their privacy and understand how they surf the internet. So we have true or false questions, multiple different questions going over the different subjects, such as, for example, surveillance data can increase police involvement for minor student behavior, which is true. And we have them go through this quiz and they get various scores and feedback based on this. So for example, we scored a 6 out of 15 here, just randomly clicking through. So we urge them to review the different sections and to better understand surveillance and their rights. And so at the end, we have the references. But all in all, we hope that this website goes through surveillance and social inequities, helps students, specifically high school students, understand the connection between them, and gives them tools both in their personal life and with invoking change that they can use to protect themselves against unwanted surveillance and understand how surveillance and technology plays out in their everyday lives. And the things that make our website a little bit different is that it's not just gamified, but it's also interactive and meant to spark conversation. And so going back to a few of our pretty interesting interactive medias that we put in here, We had the exploitation or opportunity draft, as well as scores that give specific feedback to help people understand their lives through different categories. We think that would be better than just providing the information, but giving them the tools to understand that if they understand the main things of our website, then they'll probably be very well protected against surveillance threats. We also included stories to tell the information in a more creative way. And of course, figures and infographics that specifically speak to communities that hopefully see themselves represented or this information is helpful in the long run. But thank you so much for our presentation.